I often hear couples I coach talking about their love languages with tone of resentment towards their spouse. Join me as I share with you what about love languages doesn't work. Hey, I'm Julia Woods, couples coach, trainer, and founder of Beautiful Outcome, a coaching company committed to help couples communicate their way to thriving lifetime marriages. I know that ultimately couples long for connection. And at the end of this quick lesson, I'll be sharing a free gift I have to help you do that. Today, we're going to take a look at what works and what doesn't about Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. When my husband proposed to me, the very first book we decided to read was Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. It was very eye-opening for us. We learned that the 5 love languages are acts of service, physical touch, quality time, gift giving, and words of affirmation. When we read that book, we thought we were headed for a thriving lifetime marriage because we knew how to really help each other feel loved. And as long as each other felt loved, we thought we were headed for marriage bliss. My love language is quality time, and Jeff's love language is words of affirmation. Now, what worked about that was the discovery. Now, interestingly enough, in the 32 years we've been married, our love languages have actually changed. So those are not currently our love languages, but they were when we first started our relationship. And that was super helpful. I didn't really know how to speak words of affirmation very well. And Jeff didn't know how to offer quality time. Those were not love languages that we were used to, which is a part of what attracted us to each other. So the discovery of what Gary Chapman invited us into was hugely helpful and eye-opening for us. Now, what didn't work was when we would use it like weapons. Like, you should communicate my love language, or you don't express my love language, or I'm doing it all the time. I'm speaking yours all the time, and you're not speaking mine. This doesn't work. When you use the information of the love languages like weapons, where you should on your spouse, or you help tell them consistently in a negative way what they're supposed to be doing in order to love you, that's not going to work. And as a couples coach, I see this all the time. I've even heard spouses use it as one of the top 3 reasons that they've decided to leave a marriage, because their spouse just doesn't express their love language. Now, I believe that when Gary wrote this book, he was simply creating an invitation for us to better understand our spouse. However, if we're not really interested or committed to developing our ability to understand our spouse, we can easily take tools like this and use them to try and control and manipulate our spouse. When we're using it as control, we're constantly using it as a mirror of how they're not measuring up, how they're not doing good enough as a spouse. When we're using it as manipulation, we're like constantly trying to let them know how much we're doing it for them and how little they're doing it for us. It naturally takes us in to living in our spouse's backyard or pointing in our spouse's backyard. If you're not familiar with that term, it's a term I used when I began to understand that, in essence, our marriage is like a neighborhood. And each of us as a spouse in the neighborhood have our own backyard, and it is fenced in it. It has a fence around it. And in that backyard is the things that we think, the things that we feel, the attitudes, the responses, the mood, the ways of being that we show up moment by moment, the ways we keep our commitments, the ways we don't, the frustration and the anger, the different things that we feel when life is or isn't going the way we want it to go. And we often like to stand at the fence line between our spouses and our backyard and point into their backyard. Hey, I don't like it when you do that. Hey, you should be spending more time giving me words of affirmation. Hey, you haven't done that for a long time. That's easily what we do with words of affirmation. We point and complain about our spouse's backyard rather than looking in our backyard, looking at how am I showing up with my spouse? How could understanding their love language, how could that help me learn and discover more about them? What could it help me learn and discover about myself that I'm actually have a hard time? What blocks me from expressing that love language so freely and so openly? When I look at my spouse and how they offer that love language, what can I learn about the results that produces in their life? What is it opening up for them? And how can I learn to become who it is that I'm committed to be? Because really, the more whole we become as a person, the more we evenly express all of the love languages. So my invitation to you is to look at how you're discovering your love language. If you've never discovered what your love language is or what your spouse's love language is, there's a really simple quiz you can take online. I'll put the link to that quiz in the notes under this video so you can discover what your love language is. And my invitation to you is, rather than using it as a way of controlling or manipulating or shooting on your spouse, would you use it as an opportunity to discover about yourself and about who you are as a person and what brings you to let certain love languages easily flow from you and what's limiting you from all the love languages easily flowing from you? And if you're willing to do that, I promise you, you are going to continually become a version of yourself that easily gives and receives love. And ultimately, that's the beauty of what we all want in our relationship, is love, and how to improve our ability to communicate love. If you enjoyed this episode, would you give it a thumbs up? And would you subscribe so you don't miss another episode coming up? Would you share in the comments what your love language is? Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next week. Hey, hon.
Yeah.
When we read the 5 love languages when we were engaged, I thought that we had all that we needed to live happily ever after. What did you think when we read that book?
I think after reading that book, I became focused on my one love language, which was gift giving, or words of affirmation. So I was very pigeonholed.
So you used it as a constant assessment of how I was doing in the relationship.